All right. I'm going to go ahead and get started. We have a lot to get through today, so there will probably be more folks joining, or hopefully more folks joining, but I'm certainly happy to see all the good folks already logged on so far. Welcome and thanks for your participation today. We will focus on a fiscal year 22-23 funds for 3 clean mobility programs: the planning and capacity building projects, clean mobility in schools projects, and sustainable transportation equity projects. I am Heather Choi. Presenting with me today is Violet Martin and Bree Swenson. This meeting is being recorded, and the recording will be available on our meeting webpage in 2 weeks. We will be posting the link to that webpage because that is also where we have all of our other meeting materials. You will be able to share your thoughts and comments today using the raised hand feature. So there's no chat or no Q&A. If you're looking for them, they're not there. It's because they're not available. We are just using the raised hand feature. If there are any disruptions, technical or otherwise today, we will immediately end today's meeting and send out another notice or a notice to reschedule this. Next slide, please. So on this slide, we have our agenda for today's meeting. I'll cover the background and recap section. Violet will then cover the planning and capacity building administrator section. And Bree will then cover details and requirements we're proposing for the grant proposals. We will pause for comments and questions throughout, and we'll also be posing some questions because we want to hear discussion and your thoughts and ideas today. We also have a handful of polling questions to learn more about who you are and hear your feedback that way as well. When we get to the first poll, we'll go over how to use or how to participate. As you can see, we started back in December, and today's is the second of 3 public work group meetings we have planned. Here is our ambitious projected timeline. We will release some of the solicitation materials for public comment as soon as next month. Stay tuned for Bree to discuss that later today. And we're planning the 3rd work group meeting to be held during that public comment period expected in late February, early March. The actual solicitation period for these programs are hopefully going to be held mid-2023. So this year is going to be very busy in the beginning. Next slide. This slide shows the focus areas for discussion planned in the 3 work group meetings that are part of this public process. And considering poll results from December, preferred timing for these meetings is in the afternoon, which was the scheduled start time in December and today. We may potentially hold the next meeting in the morning before noon. The programs Violet, Bree, and I are working on are one part of CARB's incentive portfolio. CARB has a few other opportunities we'd like to make sure you are aware of. The Clean Mobility Options, acronym is CMO. These are smaller scale shared mobility project vouchers. The application window 2 opens March 1st. There will be several pre-application technical assistance webinars from now until February to support folks interested in applying. And you can visit the CMO website events page, which is there, and we'll also link for you guys as well. Hopefully check out that website for more information and other events that they're holding. The other program is an Adult Education and Vocational Schools ZEV Workforce Training Project. The goal of this new training project is to promote pathways to clean transportation jobs by supporting existing programs at adult education and vocational schools. The application is slated to open early this year. And if you go to our meetings and webpage for this particular meeting, you'll also see that January 6th, there was a meeting on that Adult Education and Vocational Schools ZEV Workforce Training Project. So you can take a look at the materials that they had presented at that time as well. Okay, so now here's our first poll. See again. Yep. Okay, thank you, Violet, for launching it. And what we want to do here is have a better understanding of who's participating today. Which of these most meets what type of organization you are. We also want to make sure you know that this survey is available via office form survey on our meetings webpage as well. So let's see, and then during December, we had about a third of the participants were from non-governmental or non-profit organizations, about a fourth were government reps, and 4% were from schools. So let's see what we've got today. Can you share the results? You guys are fast. Okay, so it's very similar. Oh, we have no school districts today. So sad. Okay, so let's go ahead and move on to our next poll, which it's just let you know it's helpful for us to know where you're located and as we design our projects. Last meeting, we were light in the coastal area. So let's see who is around today. You want to go ahead and let's see. Okay, and then there's another poll too. So let's go ahead and, oh, there's two of them. I see, sorry. So this poll is not just about where you are, but not on the slide that you see before you but in the poll there, if you slide or scroll down, there's a second question. We want to know what program you're interested in. And so these polls are going on together. There's two questions. And so far we've got about 60% have participated fully in both questions. So let's leave it out for a few more. I'm going to say 10 seconds. Come on, let's see. I got one more participating, two more participants. Okay, let's go ahead and end the poll. We got a lot to go through. Oh, we got more coastal. Thanks, guys. That's awesome. We get a little bit more of the coastal representation here today. All right, so now I'm going to start talking about the background, and we're making really good time here, so I just wanted to share that with you as well. Here's a recap of our goals and the past feedback coming up. Last November, the board approved $55 million for fiscal year 22-23 clean mobility investments. These dollars are allocated to projects that will provide zero emission and clean mobility options that reflect what the community wants and needs and where the investments are needed most. The $55 million will be allocated to the following programs as indicated in the 4 boxes on slide 8. $5 million for planning and capacity building, $15 million for clean mobility in schools, $15 million for sustainable transportation equity projects. And those three are grouped together, and the focus of the working groups that we're talking with you, the focus of these working groups that we're conducting today, but we do coordinate closely with the clean mobility options that has the $20 million allocated shown in the 4th most right box. Planning and capacity building projects are intended to increase transportation equity by improving local understanding of residents' transportation needs, preparing communities to implement clean transportation and land use projects, essentially developing a foundation for organizational and community capacity building to support their zero emission future. CEMIS and STEP projects are intended to increase transportation equity by addressing community identified needs and increasing access to key destinations. CEMIS is focused on public K-12 school districts, and STEP has a focus on reducing vehicle miles traveled, which is necessary to achieve the state's climate goals. The two solicitations are going to be happening around the same time. A solicitation for community-based projects will include $15 million for STEP plus $15 million for CEMIS projects, and will include $3 million for planning and capacity building grant projects. A separate solicitation will be held to select an administrator to 1, administer the planning capacity building grants, and 2, provide technical assistance to all 3 program grantees during their grant implementation activities. At December's work group, we received feedback that of the $5 million allocated for the entire planning and capacity building program, $3 million would go towards grants for communities implementing their planning effort, and $2 million towards administration tasks and technical assistance tasks to support all the community-based projects to ensure sustainability and the viability of these funds. Which brings us to more recap. We heard a lot of great ideas and feedback on staff's proposals during the first work group meeting in December. The next few slides list that feedback and our responses. I won't spend too much time discussing past feedback today because we want to ensure we have time for today's discussion topics, but I will pause in a few slides to hear any other comments on the feedback from December's meeting. The most important goal for the 3 programs is to increase transportation equity. Based on feedback from work group number 1, here is the revised definition. Transportation equity occurs when the transportation system addresses the unique transportation barriers and improves the quality of life of residents disproportionately impacted by air pollution or who lack access to services. That was a mouthful. We heard general support and a lot of helpful ideas about a phased approach for the community-based project solicitation. For example, provide feedback on the applications along the way to help applicants improve their chances of success and focus technical assistance during the full application phase on meaningful community engagement to help build out the details of the proposed projects. We also heard feedback on eligible applicants and project types, including that it would help applicants to see some examples of successful partnership types and that outreach and education are important components of these projects. Since the last work group, we have also been discussing including the option to fund VMT reducing policies that help jurisdictions achieve the pro-housing designation. On the technical assistance and administrator solicitation, we heard a lot of feedback on the need for more localized and context-specific support. This feedback helped us identify some key priorities for this solicitation, and we want to discuss how we can best accomplish them with you today. As part of the annual funding plan process, CARB staff like Violet and Bree and I rely on feedback to develop program requirements. Feedback received previously provided the basis for our proposal before you today. Today, we're mainly focusing on addressing the need to prioritize outreach and investments and reduce the complexity of the application process and the requirements. We'll pause now to check in with you all to see if there are any comments or questions thus far. You can raise your hand. Oh, I still have to pull. Raise your hand in the Zoom feature, and we will begin calling on in the order that they have raised their hand. Sorry about that. So I'm gonna give you guys a couple of seconds. I see coming up is Craig Flax, Leonard Sitz, and Sandy Tyler so far. Let me see how I can allow you to. Okay, Craig. What am I?
There we go.
There you go. I was like, yeah, totally. Can you hear me? Okay, yeah, you can hear me. Sorry.
Yeah, I'm Craig Flax from Utes, and I'm just curious. I'm new to the CMIS program. We're participating in CMO, but with CMIS, so we're a nonprofit organization that works on a program in conjunction with a couple of different school districts. I'm wondering if, as a nonprofit, And we participate in helping with transportation, and we're hoping to purchase our own fleet with CMO money. Could we do the same with CMIS money, utilizing electric vehicles for outings that we do in conjunction with the school districts that we serve?
Yeah, that would be an eligible project type. And then also coming up, Craig, we have, we'll be talking more about that, who can apply and the project types that we're envisioning. So stay tuned for actual, comment on that part too.
Perfect. Thank you so much.
Sure. All right. Let me see if I can get this so let's go to Leonard Sitz. I allowed you to talk.
Okay, and I unmuted, so it should work.
Yes.
And I'm gonna not state my affiliation because I don't represent my affiliation, but I work on travel and emissions analysis all the time. And the point I want to make is to call into question VMT being the cause of emissions. And certainly it's kind of correlated, but if you can imagine a parking lot full of idling cars, they don't have any miles accumulated, but they do put out a goodly amount of emissions. So of the people who apply, I hope you would consider that it's the emissions you're trying to constrain rather than the VMT.
Okay, yeah, thanks for the comment. And then, okay, let's see. I think we have Sandy Tyler. So Sandy.
Hello.
Yes, there you are. Okay.
Hey. Yeah, I'm sound a little naive, but this is part of my research. I run a transportation department in Modesto, a school district in Modesto.
Yeah,
and
I just was out there.
You really?
Yeah, because the EPA, you guys got some buses from the EPA. So yeah, go ahead. Sorry.
Okay, okay, great. No, actually, I'm just here. I'm kind of sitting in on a lot of these workshops, just trying to gain understanding of what steps we should take at this time. We want to go into this. I mean, we want to get a few electric buses, and I'm just not sure how. I know you can't explain this to me in this presentation, but I was thinking if we get a couple of electric buses, then it would be a great start to see what it's about, how they function, how we can help in sustaining a zero emissions, right?
Yep.
I believe I'm in the right place.
Yep.
Basically, you are sharing what we can do, and as far as grants to purchase. Is it different for schools or?
Well, that's what we're working on today, Sandy, is that the Clean Mobility in Schools pilot projects was launched in 2018, 2019, or 2018 and 19. And then the STEP project launched like a year later. So now, we've been a couple years, we've seen how these projects can work in their own silos, I guess you could say. And now we're working on how to incorporate them and make it even more viable for schools to do more than just buses. So you are definitely in the right place. And I look forward to working with you on your projects and learning more about what you want to do. But yeah, stay tuned. We will talk more about the eligible projects shortly. And so you'll get some ideas of what we're thinking of.
Beautiful. Thank you so much.
You're very welcome. And I think that looks like that's all we have for our raised hands. I don't know how to make people or how to put your hands down. Because I think Leonard and Sandy, you have your hands up, but we're okay. I think we're good. So I think from now or at this point, we can go ahead and move on to Violet.
Before Violet, you go, can I just add one thing? Oh, I forgot to turn on my camera. Here we go. We actually.
This is Bree Swenson.
Thanks, Heather. We actually mostly covered eligible projects in the work group meeting before this. And so if as we're talking, you're not getting the information that you're looking for, for these programs. Maybe Ashley, you can at some point in this meeting chat in a link to the draft eligible projects handout, or just like a link to the materials from the last work group meeting. So Craig, Sandy, anyone else who is interested in getting a sense of the eligible projects that we're discussing today, you can also look at it through those links.
Yeah, thanks, Bree.
Thank you.
Okay,
Hi,
we'll move on. Hello, Heather. Okay, so we wanted to start today's discussion with the second solicitation, which is for a technical assistance provider and the planning and capacity building grant administrator. Based on feedback from the last work group, we heard that of the 5 million, 2 million seemed appropriate to allocate toward technical assistance and administrative support for the community-led projects. So this equates to an annual budget of about $670,000 a year to provide these services over 3 years, which may support perhaps up to 4 dedicated staff. And this organization would be responsible for administering the 3 million in planning and capacity building grants, providing technical assistance to support implementation from anywhere between 6 to 22 grantees, because this includes CMIS and STEP grantees, implementing a regional technical assistance approach, which we'll talk about a little bit in the next couple of slides, and providing capacity building support to applicants that do not receive funding this cycle. So we're calling out some of these numbers and expectations to make sure the ask is both reasonable and feasible with $2 million. So today we wanted to dig into the technical assistance for implementation support and the regional approach a bit more. So for the next slide, the specific things that this organization would do for technical assistance, and we touched on this during our last work group and want to continue to fine tune some of our ideas and what we heard. And this includes the categories identified here on slide 20. These are the minimum level of activities needed to support technical assistance recipients. The modifications we made based on our understanding of the feedback we received include ensuring technical assistance focuses on making projects more equitable. So rather than making equity a separate category, we're making all categories include this more broadly. We also heard that organizational capacity building activities, such as an organization needs assessment, strategic planning, and relationship building, as well as activities that fall under evaluation and impact assessments for things like data collection and supporting evaluations of a project's impact, are the most critical. So we'll build this into the solicitation and ensure we're getting applicants qualified to support these areas. We also heard that as part of projects implementing the TA, then TA needs to be better, needs to support grantees by connecting them to other funding opportunities that can support their long-term goals and project plans, or with project financial sustainability. So the arrow below represents these activities as a continuum, and there's a lot of overlap. So for example, tracking progress also relates very closely to evaluation. So our next slide. There are many benefits to setting up our technical assistance to support applicants at a regional scale, rather than using a standard statewide approach that may not necessarily resonate with certain communities. A regional approach can support place-based partnership building, including ambassadors, and provide technical assistance that's more relevant for that specific community. How this is organized initially matters, mainly how we determine the regions and consider geographic diversity as well as specific community types. We have to be intentional here and focus, since we're just getting started with this approach, and we know we have a limit. We have to limit this here based on the funding that's available. So do we focus on all regions or just a few to start out? So I'm going to launch our next poll to kind of get at this particular question. So there are a number of other programs that have identified specific regions. Are there any examples, or are these examples ones you recognize and or make sense to leverage or build from? So the last work group, the Energy Commission's EPIC Challenge, was identified as a great experience, perhaps even a model program. The challenge to reimagine affordable mixed-use development needed to fall into one of 4 regionally based groups. So those regions included the Bay Area, Northern California and Central Valley, LA, and the 4th group included the Imperial Valley, Inland Empire, and San Diego. So that's one option to consider. Another is local and regional governments need information to support action in their communities. So to address this need, the 4th assessment includes reports for 9 regions of the state. So should we align with these regions, which include Central Coast, Inland Deserts, LA, North Coast, the Sac Valley, San Diego, San Francisco Bay Area, the San Joaquin Valley, and the Sierra Nevada? Or maybe we should allow grantees to propose regions, or you perhaps have another idea. So I'm going to end that poll and share some results here. So it seems like it's fairly split, but I think that the 9 regions, as well as allowing grantees to propose regions. So we'll discuss that a bit more and then give you an opportunity to share more ideas on that. So for our next Q&A, we'd be happy to discuss any of those responses to that last poll, but we're also interested in your feedback on a couple of other questions. And that includes what should be prioritized to ensure long-term success of the regional approach, as well as just some of the things generally shared about the long-term or the planning capacity building efforts. And is there concern with focusing on a few regions initially and then building this over time to include the whole state? Also, what could this look like with the available funding? Now I'll stop sharing those results. Oh, okay, thank you. Okay, so we'll break again for some feedback. If there are any questions or ideas that you all are interested in sharing or discussing, please raise your hand. And it looks like we have, first up is Creighton Randall. So I am going to, I think, allow to talk. There we go. Help me. I think it's asking if I can promote them.
He's Creighton's using an older version of Zoom, it said, so that's why we're not able to allow him to talk.
Okay, well, we could probably switch that up. So Creighton,
Creighton can't talk.
can you talk?
Sorry about
I think
that,
I
guys.
just didn't. No problem.
So thanks for accommodating my tech, my Chromebook. By the way, sometimes to think about, you may have a lot of community-based organizations that needed technical assistance that have the kind of light duty technology. Maybe I'm the only one.
Chromebook,
So, three really quick points. The first, I think, addresses your poll. I would make as much of a sort of a deference towards the way that potential capacity need is being identified by potential grantees geographically, right? Some organizations may be like really rooted in a neighborhood, and others may be serving, let's say 2 different regions that really don't quite line up in the same area that you were just identifying. So I would be flexible there. Related to that, I think our advice, this is Creighton with mobility development. We're involved in a number of CARB projects. Because you have invested in so many projects so far that involve so many community-based organizations, I think our advice would be don't start from scratch. So maybe look first towards investing in organizations that have already demonstrated kind of a commitment of some kind, either through a community needs assessment or through an so yeah, look to organizations already involved in this work. The second point I would make is just, that 60%, 40% ratio seems a little bit high on the TA. I think our advice would be put 90% or more of it directly to in the hands of community-based organizations. Perhaps there's some way to kind of thread that needle. Maybe CBOs are in a better position, say, to identify where they need technical assistance rather than defining it from the outset. I think also part of why I'm making that recommendation is that technical assistance that CARB has provided thus far directly has historically been kind of lacking in areas of say, experience in shared mobility operations, or even in the areas of direct like project management. It's a very unique industry. So yeah, both of those areas, there's a learning curve, even for the technical assistance providers themselves. So again, it's like, maybe this is kind of connected to the third point I'd like to make, which is the only area I saw that seemed to be clearly missing on your list of things that you would want to fund out of this is like, how do you provide training? How do you provide funds for training for learning how to do this work, right? I mean, it seems like very simple when I say it that way, but like, it's like training in shared mobility operations and budgeting, and it's a unique new field, right? So we need to find some way to like support that work. It's something that our team has been spending a lot of time on lately. Kind of maybe falls into the workforce development camp a little bit, but I would find some way to set aside some funds within capacity building for building a knowledge base for this work, specifically among community-based organizations. Sorry, that was a long-winded set of comments, but I think I got everything in there.
No, thank you. That's perfectly fine. And we appreciate those comments and suggestions, and may reach out to you further to, discuss in more depth if need be. I don't see any other hands raised. Oh,
Leonard's got one.
Yeah.
Leonard, do you want to go ahead? You want me to call him? Allow it to talk?
yeah,
There,
please
I got.
feel free to.
Leonard, can you try and speak now? You need to unmute yourself. I hear typing.
All right, I've got it now. I've been
Yep.
getting all sorts of horrible phone calls, and I'm sure most of you are as well. But anyway, I just wanted to mention again under the what should be prioritized to ensure long-term success. And I want to make sure that you're considering that it's one of the issues is exposure to protected populations from air pollutants. And that could very well be not from the travel of the people that are addressing the issue, but people are coming through their territory, like on freeways or going up hills, or again, parking lots, anything that's producing the pollution and affecting the populations we're trying to protect. So that's it.
Thanks, Leonard.
Yes, thank you. That's a very important point.
Mhm.
Are there any others that have some thoughts or feedback, or anyone who'd like to share additional ideas on the regional approach in particular? How they responded to the poll? Okay, well then I think we can move on. So where are we here? Okay, so we're going to kind of switch gears for the rest of the work group, and we'd like to start discussing some application details for community-based projects. So this is covering the first solicitation a bit more. The concept phase of the application is meant to help organizations better manage their resources, especially since funding is so limited this year, but provide enough information that would allow us to get an adequate overview of the project and where it is at in terms of readiness. Our initial ideas of what the concept phase of the application look like is information that would be required of all 3 community-based projects. So planning and capacity building, CMIS, and STEP. So the concept would cover things such as the basic project description, so we can determine if the project's eligible, the identification of the lead applicant and sub-applicants, and a tentative partnership structure to determine if the applicants are also eligible. Also a project area map and description to ensure the community is eligible, and an estimated budget request. So is this request within the available budget? So for the project area eligibility, this is simply more than 50% of the project must be located in disadvantaged and low-income census tracts as designated in CalEnviroScreen 4.0. So this is the latest iteration of the California Communities Environmental Health Screen tool, which we'll put that link in the chat for you to take a look at when you get a chance. The scoring criteria will mainly focus on how the projects meet the program goals we covered in slides 9 and 10. So in the case of planning and capacity building effort, a project that attempts to understand community transportation needs or plan or develop a project that was previously identified as meeting a community need, or to implement a series of projects through CMIS and or STEP that addresses community needs and either support public school districts or reduce VMTs. And I guess even better would do both. How the project addresses your community identified transportation needs and supports transportation equity is also a key factor. We're also looking at extra points. So the purpose of extra points is to level the playing field for typically under-resourced applicants. And thus far, we've identified 4 potential areas in which we could improve under-resourced applicants' ability to participate in this process. So those areas include the lead applicant is a tribal government or a community-based organization. The project is in a rural community. The project was identified through a STEP planning and capacity building grant. The community has not received CARB clean mobility implementation funding before. And then we're also looking at needs-based criteria. So much of the feedback we've heard from stakeholders relates to selecting funding recipients using needs-based criteria. But we're actually kind of struggling to find the appropriate data sources to expand upon the needs-based criteria that we already use, which is mainly the existing project area requirement. So we're looking for other ideas on how we can expand this via scoring. An example could be additional points for projects that are in the top 5% of disadvantaged communities. But like I said, we're looking for additional ideas and would love to hear any ideas that you all have. So I think we're hitting another comment and question period. So what we're wanting to hear your ideas on is what concept phase eligibility requirements that we shared today might prove challenging to meet. Also, what criteria could CARB use to score applications based on need? So we'll take some hands here. We have a hand raised from Susan Strachan. Or did. Susan, are you still interested in speaking? I don't. Please raise your hand again if you are. Okay, there we go.
Thank you. Now I'm unmuted.
Yes, okay, great.
So I have a question in regards to the requirements that applicant be a disadvantaged community, and I'm wondering why you don't include low-income communities under AB 1550 as well.
Yeah, actually, They are included, if I'm not mistaken. I know for the STEP implementation grants, they were not in previous years, but they were for the STEP planning and capacity building grants. And we're absolutely intending to include both low-income designated communities as well as those designated as disadvantaged communities. And so SB 535 and AB 1550 communities.
Okay, because the Cal Enviro screen does not include AB 1550, correct? I think.
I don't think so, but Bree,
Yeah, that's correct. The CalEnviro screen is specific to identifying the disadvantaged communities, and then we are also low-income communities are also eligible. And yeah, in the future, we'll link to the actual priority populations map that includes both.
Thank you.
okay, next up we have Wesley Rudiman. And if once I allow or unmute you, please unmute on your end and state your organization as well.
Hi, good afternoon. Wes Rudiman with Active San Gabriel Valley. With regards to the second question, I think if you can look at potentially providing additional points on a sliding scale based on need, for example, under CalEnviro screen versus just a fixed amount, might be a bit fair in terms of giving the communities with really the most high need or with the highest need some preferential scoring and a better shot to secure funds. Thanks.
Thank you. Okay, and then like we have a comment from Lonnie Mason. Your line's unmuted.
Yes, good afternoon. Good afternoon. My name is Lonnie Mason, actually the Executive Director of First Generation Environmental Health and Economic Development based out of the Bayview Hunters Point community. I got on a little bit late. So I wanted to ask, and I'm sorry about that. I wanted to ask the question in regards to this, because you probably already answered it. When would the funding be available, or when would this application open, and when would the funding be available for this particular capacity building program?
So we're hoping to release the solicitation as soon as April. And so at this time, we're
April 2023?
Yes, this year,
Okay,
sorry.
okay.
So we're looking for, the, I guess, spring, summer timeframe. We're definitely aiming for April. And between now and that point, we'll be releasing some information for public comment, but we'll also have another work group so we can fine tune some of the things that we're proposing and make sure that the project criteria is meeting community needs and accessible and everything.
So when would the funding be available, particularly for this particular program?
Well, the funding would be available. So once we go through the process of the solicitation and the timeline that's required, I don't know if we've settled on how long we're going to have this solicitation out for, but let's say it's 90 days or something like that, then we have to go through the process of scoring and making sure that all of the eligibility criteria is there. We're proposing a 2-phase application, so it will take a little bit longer so that we can ensure that
You said a 2-page application. 2-page?
2-phase.
Okay.
Sorry, 2-phase.
Okay.
So the initial phase would be some basic program eligibility. What we're trying to do with that approach is make it a little bit easier for communities to, demonstrate that there's a need within their community and ensure that the project that they're proposing is eligible. And we just covered some of those things in a few slides back. Once we've established those projects as being eligible, we're trying to move forward how we move those forward, whether it's highest scoring and things like that. We're going to further vet through this work group process, but we don't want to move everyone forward if with such limited funding. We want to make sure it's those projects that are ready, things like that. And I realize for a planning capacity building effort, it might not be so much about readiness, but it'll be some of the
So let me ask
needs-based
you this
criteria.
question. What is the total amount for the funding, for this, for each particular organization?
Well, so for planning capacity building, we're proposing 3 million for the actual community-led projects, and then 15 million and 15 million each to STEP and CMS project. So a total of 30 million there.
And then
And let me just add,
I was just going to say that 3 million for the planning capacity building projects will be, that's total. So what you were anticipating, maybe over 10 projects total in that. Go ahead, Bree.
and just to answer your earlier question, Lonnie, the funds are technically like ready now. And so it's
Okay.
just a matter of us selecting the projects, getting under an agreement with the selected applicants. And then immediately, as soon as that agreement is signed, the funds will be available.
Yeah, so that's what I thought. I thought the funds were available right now, and that's why I was, asking when will it be released. So, okay, that's the process beforehand. Okay, because Bayview Hunters Point is a disadvantaged community. I'm sure you guys are aware of that, and so we're, looking forward to. Carb knows who we are. They're aware of us, so. I hold my comments for later, but okay. So now I know the process. So the application process will start in April, right? In regards to this.
Yes, so we're planning on having that solicitation available for, start receiving applications in the April timeframe. And thanks Bree for clarifying that. Yes, so the money is available now. It's just a matter of us setting up this process so that it's we can pretty much go from there.
Okay.
And just in case anyone is familiar with the way clean mobility options work, I just want to make sure it's clear that when we say we'll open a solicitation in April, we'll actually release the materials for you to start working on the applications. That's not the deadline for submitting an application. So
Okay.
there will be a longer time frame for you to actually submit an application.
Okay, thank you. I appreciate that. I was going to ask that question. All right, thank you.
Thank you. So Olivia Seidman, you are now unmuted.
Thank you. Hi, Olivia Seidman with Leadership Council for Justice and Accountability based in Fresno. We work with a lot of, to answer the question around criteria to score applications based on need, one of the issues we have seen with relying on Callum ViroScreen exclusively, and I think it's the same problem with AB 1550 oftentimes, is the use of the census tract as the unit for identifying target communities. In rural areas, sometimes a very small disadvantaged unincorporated community within a larger census tract might be a community that is in great need, has a high pollution burden, is low income, but because of the size of the census tracts, that data can get lost, especially since oftentimes there isn't great data for smaller unincorporated communities. So we would urge also the inclusion of the definition of disadvantaged unincorporated communities from SB 244, which basically is it's fringe island or legacy communities that are 80% or below statewide MHI, that have a medium household income that's 80% or below of statewide MHI. And so that's one way that we have found helps get around some of those problems with using the census tract as a unit in rural areas. Thank you.
Thank you. We'll definitely look into that and see how we can incorporate that. And make sure that we share that information with everyone as well. Are there any other questions or comments? Okay.
We're also doing really good on time.
Perhaps we can move on. Yeah, definitely. So if we move on, we can definitely, take questions, and there'll be opportunities for additional questions and comments throughout the next part of the presentation as well. So with that, I'll hand it over to Bree, and she'll share some more information.
Thanks, Violet. Let's see if I can get this slide to work. Okay, so we just covered what would be in the concept phase of the application process. After the concept phase applications are submitted, CARB staff would review those applications. We would check that they meet all the eligibility requirements that Violet went through. Those that did would be scored using the scoring criteria that Violet also just went through. And then the highest scoring applications of that bunch of concept applications would move on. We need to figure out how many applications will move on to the full application phase. And there are a few different ways that we could do this, so we want to get your input. We have this next polling question that Violet will launch for me that asks, what should CARB use to determine how many applicants move from the concept phase to the full application phase? So our options are like, should it be a specific percentage of applicants that we move on, or a specific number of applicants that we move on? Should we move on just enough applicants to use the available budget? So, that will help ensure that applicants who we don't have budget for don't have to fill out the full application. And then the other option is, should we move on all applicants that meet the eligibility requirements? And so that would mean that, more applicants go through that process of filling out the full application, even if there's not a budget, but it would give them an opportunity to compete. Or is there another option that you would suggest? So we'll give you a second to think through that question. Okay, I think we can end the poll, Violet. Looks like we're slowing down. So here are the results. We have pretty close number of people interested in just enough applicants to use the available budget and all applicants that meet the eligibility requirements, which is an interesting outcome. Actually, at this time, if anyone has like strong opinions that they want to voice right now, if you, go ahead and raise your hand and we can take comments and questions on this polling question. And Violet, you can go ahead and stop sharing as well. Okay, so I think the order was, we'll start with Olivia Seidemann. You're unmuted.
Thank you. Yeah, I guess my thought was all applicants who meet the eligibility requirements, and I'd be interested to hear other folks' perspectives. But to my thought is, there's an opportunity between the concept, and maybe I'm, projecting because I've done, applications where there's a pre-proposal and then a final proposal. And I feel like, with the concept, there's still time to fine tune and maybe like extrapolate on some of the things in the full application. So it seems a bit premature to kind of decide in the concept phase without seeing the full application materials. And that kind of gives lower capacity orgs and puts lower capacity orgs or applicants at a disadvantage, because it seems to me like there's less time to like build up resources. And I guess, that would be my thought process, but I'd be interested to hear from other folks if maybe a different one works better for this grant specifically. But that's been my experience with other grants.
Thanks. That's interesting. All right, Craig is next.
Hi, excuse me, sorry, Craig from Utes. Yeah, I have the exact opposite feeling. And really the reason is, again, we're a very low capacity organization. We don't have a lot of money and we don't have a lot of resources, and we're busy being operational, and we don't have time to do these really complicated grant applications. So for me, it's a matter of get it in there with a minimum amount of work done. If we make a threshold, awesome. Then knowing that we're going to get the funding, I'm more than happy to put in a ton of work to make it happen, to cross all the T's and dot all the I's. I think if you have just enough applicants to use the available budget, you end up not wasting a lot of time from organizations who just are going to be thrown into a lottery and have a really good chance of losing. But that said, maybe have a few more applicants than what's the available budget in case people do fall short, for whatever reason they need to fall out. So you have a couple of other people in line. But yeah, that's my thinking is I don't want to go through the entire grant application process. It's like standing in line for a lottery ticket, to be honest. So
Thanks.
Yeah.
Okay, next up is Kevin Hamilton.
Hi, Kevin Hamilton with Central California Asthma Collaborative. Yeah, I agree with the first speaker, all applicants who meet the eligibility requirements. Again, this is the concept paper, which I consider to be very similar to an LOI, and people say, oh, that's a short. No, I've done 7, 8, 10-page LOIs before with pretty detailed budgets. And that's what you guys ask for. It's a very similar kind of process. The other thing is, if you make it very clear that there is a limited amount of budget funding, folks know that they're taking a risk at that point when they move from the concept approval, assuming that the concept paper is approved. There is going to be a culling that happens there. It's not like everybody who submits the concept application is going to meet your requirements. Is that correct? And there will be a culling there anyway. You're not going to let everybody in just because they meet the eligibility requirements. They will also have to present a concept that meets what you need it to meet, what this program needs. Correct?
Well, I think that's the question. I mean, that fourth option in the poll is saying it doesn't matter what they scored in the scoring criteria. If they meet the eligibility requirements, we'll move them on. And I think what you might be describing is something more similar to, like, if they meet a minimum score on top of meeting the eligibility thresholds, and we don't have that decided yet, but that would be like kind of we would score them to a point where we would be like, yeah, we're interested in this. It not only meets our eligibility requirements, but we're interested in seeing what this project is actually like.
Yeah, I think, again, my first blush looking at this question is there's not enough information been given to answer it within the limited things. But then if it is just flat, enough applicants for the budget or eligibility requirements, then I think each organization knows that if they meet the eligibility requirements and they come through that part, they know there's only a limited amount of money, and we're all big people, so we've got to make up our decision about whether we want to move forward or not, still knowing that the budget hasn't changed. Again, this is a very evolving environment on the budget side, let's face it. So you can't really predict in 2 months what that's going to look like. None of us can, or with the May revise, and what we'll know about between now and then. So I think it's premature again to cut people off who just because they you don't have enough money. And again, CARB it's not like you don't have a long history of that. We've had programs where everybody's submitted a lot of applications and you've had to cut them off because there's not enough money. But at least they got to submit it. I would also recommend, I heard the gentleman who just spoke recommend the idea of picking up, having more than in the queue than you actually have money for. Because again, between that concept approval and meeting those eligibility requirements, time goes by and again, people drop out, or maybe their project, even though it meets the eligibility requirements, doesn't meet when it's fully fleshed out the needs of the program. And so it gets cut that way. So again, having a robust group to say to, you didn't make the first cut, we're going to be processing these applications. We'll be taking them in order should others not be funded, and put your application in its place. So I wouldn't close the door at all here, quite honestly.
Okay, thanks.
Thanks.
And then we've got Wes Ruderman.
Hi again, a quick clarifying question. For this first round, the set amount of funding that will be available for projects, don't you?
Correct.
Right. So I think the last point made, there is some certainty around how many projects could be funded, and I don't think that's as much of a concern. I think our experience has been, we're in a part of East Los Angeles County with a lot of small, heavily pollution burdened agencies and communities that don't have a lot of resources. There are, more and more smaller grants at the state and regional level that they can pursue, but there just frankly isn't the staff and agency community time to pursue all of them. So, our position has increasingly become that you're really helping everyone insofar as spending their time efficiently by saving them from pursuing a full-fledged application if you don't have the funding to fund the majority of projects. So, Caltrans, like the ATP program, for example, it's under 20% of applicants are funded now. So if you can move forward with a model that allows for good review of concept plans and funds most of them, if not all of them. I know we're seeing some agencies are looking at accepting all the eligible projects that meet the threshold and then doing a lottery of those ones. Maybe you set your benchmark at a very strong concept proposal, and then within those, if they're more, then there's funding available. Do some sort of a randomization selection of those projects, which would somewhat account for the fact that maybe there's slight discrepancies in scoring. But we certainly would lean towards not asking everyone to submit a full-fledged application if there just isn't enough funding to support the majority of those projects. Thanks.
Thanks. Interesting idea. Any other thoughts on this? We've got Lonnie.
Yes, once again, Lonnie Mason, Executive Director of First Generation Environmental Health and Economic Development, based out of the Bayview Hunters Point community. We talk about this all the time. You have small grassroots organizations who will need assistance. It seems like when you have the NGOs, larger groups, our agency that come into our community, they have the assistance, they have the funding in order to help them to be able to actually fill these applications out and go through the process. So there should be some assistance and help towards those disadvantaged community who don't have the actual funding, to present this project. They should, receive some type of assistance because they lack the funding. It's always the Black community that lacks the funding in order to get the assistance and help that is needed in order to apply for these grants. This is not something new. This is something that's been talked about for so many years, because this is something that's needed. But not only that, CARB need to do their due diligence when it comes to evaluating these organizations that are applying, for these particular grants. Are they for environmental? Are they EJ, organization, right? Are they about environmental justice? We don't want an organization that comes on here and applies, but yet in turn they're responsible for putting a homeless shelter in the midst of a toxic waste dump. So if you're about environmental justice, why would you put a homeless shelter or be okay with it for those poor African-American people be put in that environment? That's not environmental justice. And so CARB needs to be aware of these organizations that participate in this process. You need to know what they're doing. I don't care who they are, because it's not about just, someone writing out a fancy grant and then receiving it, but yet they're not doing what is qualified within their community. They're putting poor, helpless people in harm's way. That's not environmental justice. So this is what CARB should be aware of when focusing on these particular applications. When they are presented, you need to know the organization and what they're involved in and what they have been involved in, instead of just providing and giving them funding, knowing that they're not about environmental justice. I can go on and on. I don't want to waste too much time, but I'm sorry. I just thought I need to say that because CARB needs to pay special attention to those organizations. Let's do what's right for our people. Let's not put people in harm's way, homeless people especially, poor people. And unfortunately in our community is Black people. They are the lowest on the totem pole. They're not getting the assistance. Black organization, grassroots organizations not getting the funding and assistance to help the people within their community who are suffering the most. There we go. Thank you for my time.
Thank you. Important things to get on the record. The next comment is from Leonard.
Yes, thank you. I just wanted to reinforce the last speaker a bit. I made a trip from North Sacramento to Southeast Sacramento, but I tried to take a shortcut and ended up driving underneath a bunch of freeways and seeing far more homeless people than I expected to see there. They're really heavily concentrated all along the freeways there in Northeast Sacramento. And they're, of course, getting really zapped by all the pollution coming off of the freeways. And giving them electric vehicles is not going to do much for that environment. So once again, the exposure issue should be addressed perhaps by staff work at the Air Resources Board to locate where there are vulnerable or where there are affected populations.
Thank you. All right. I'll move on to the next and last section of the worker meeting, and then we will have one more chance for comments and questions at the end before we close. Let's see here. So now in this timeline we've gotten past the concept phase. We're in the full application phase now. And just like the concept phase, we'll have eligibility requirements, and we'll have scoring criteria in the full application phase. As part of the full application phase, we'll ask for, our proposal is to ask for a letter of support from each partner that's listed in the application to demonstrate to us their commitment to be involved in the project. We'll ask for a more detailed scope of work and a timeline, as well as a description of how the project is consistent with existing local and regional plans. Things like sustainable community strategies, safe routes to schools plans, general plans, etc. Whatever types of plans the community has if they exist. We'll also ask for some more detail on budget, readiness, and the plans for collecting and tracking data on project implementation. I'm going to go over the requirements for each of those 3 sections in a little bit more detail right now. So we will be asking for confirmation on the 3 budget requirements listed here. So we want to confirm that at least 50%, actually I should say more than 50% of the budget would fund projects located within disadvantaged or low-income community census tracts. That's the proposal, and we will look into Olivia's recommendation to expand that. For clean mobility in schools and STEP specifically, we would also be expecting more than half of the budget to go toward actual clean transportation projects and services, those with quantifiable emission reduction and air pollution reduction benefits. So, you know, actual clean transportation projects, active transportation infrastructure, public transit, shared mobility, zero emission shared mobility services, zero emission school buses, etc. And then we're asking for a minimum of 2% of the total proposed budget to go towards data tracking and reporting. This 2% is mostly going to be used as a signal to make sure applicants are accounting for the work and the resources that go into data tracking and reporting. But we would likely expect more of the budget to go toward this element. And we would not be requiring a resource contribution, though, of course, additional funds and in-kind support going into the projects is allowed to enhance the projects. As far as readiness requirements goes, we would be asking for California Environmental Quality Clearance, Environmental Quality Act clearance, CEQA clearance, if it's relevant for the projects, to be obtained within 6 months after grant execution. This wouldn't be relevant for the planning and capacity building projects, and we would expect most other project types to likely just need to demonstrate their use of a CEQA exemption. And then we would also be expecting any other readiness like site control, permits, would need to be documented before that relevant project is scoped to start. And in the application, we'd want to make sure that the applicant had thought through what is needed to get that project in place and confirm that they will be able to meet any of those readiness requirements by the time the project is scoped to start. As far as data, we would expect the applicant to commit to 3 things. We're not asking for applicants to quantify their benefits, so quantify their emission reductions and VMT reductions. We're not expecting that to happen at the time of application, but we would ask that they work with CARB to quantify those benefits after the funds have been awarded. And this is mostly relevant to STEP and clean mobility in schools based on the types of projects that we'd be funding. We would be asking for annual reporting to CARB on different types of data, and some of that data is listed on this slide. And the types of data we'd be asking for would vary based on the project type we're funding. And then evaluations. So CARB may fund third-party evaluations of projects, but we would also expect the grantee to conduct evaluations with their partners to get feedback on project implementation, to update their processes and projects as they go, and to hear from the residents that are being impacted by the projects. So that would be a kind of an expectation wrapped into the data requirements. Those are the eligibility requirements. Once the applications meet those eligibility requirements, they would move on to the scoring criteria. And this gives you a sense of the types of things that we're thinking about scoring on. So we'd be looking for projects that meet the goals of the program and are integrated with each other and with the broader existing transportation system. We'd be looking for applicants and partners that have experience in this work, a demonstrated capacity to do the work and to fulfill their identified roles, whatever those are within the scope of the project. We'd be looking for partnership structures that consider existing power dynamics between the different entities involved and that incorporate meaningful processes for residents and representatives of the community to inform the project, to provide feedback, to kind of have that loop, communication loop going. And we'd be looking for an outreach and engagement plan that considers the community context, is creative, covers the different projects included in the application, and considers the type of guidance that we released with the first STEP solicitation. So Ashley's going to chat in that original STEP community inclusion guidance to give you a sense of the things that we're thinking about. And that's not all. This is the other slide of scoring criteria that we're considering. So we're thinking about looking at projects that have a clear plan for the use or maintenance of the project over time. So for clean mobility in schools and STEP, this may mean having a plan or at least some ideas to pursue for how to fund or finance the clean transportation projects that started during the grant term on after the grant term ends. So our goal is to be able to continue these projects after the grant term ends without additional funding from CARB. For planning and capacity building, this type of sustainability approach might mean having the necessary partners on board and having a commitment to implement the projects that are identified through that planning process during the grant term, and then also having ideas for how to fund those projects that are identified during the grant term. We'd be scoring the scope, timeline, and budget to make sure that they're reasonable based on the experience CARB has had so far administering these types of grants. We'd be scoring the scope as well to make sure to see if it incorporates workforce development, specifically in the climate and clean transportation sectors. And similar to community inclusion, we have some past guidance from STEP on workforce development that Ashley will chat in, so you can get a sense of the types of activities that might be relevant to workforce development. And this is applicable to all three programs, even though it was originally, this guidance was originally just for STEP. And lastly, we would be looking to see that the scope incorporated displacement avoidance, particularly to account for the potential impacts of funded projects. This may not be relevant for all types of projects. All types of projects may not have displacement impacts, but we want to see that applicants have thought through that and identified measures where they can to reduce the impacts of displacement. And Ashley will chat in a link to the STEP displacement and housing guidance from the initial STEP solicitation, again, just to give you a sense of the types of activities that might be included here. All right. So this is our last comments and questions slide today. So we have a few questions for you on that full application phase. Will there be any eligibility requirements that may be particularly challenging for applicants to meet? And can you help us identify those? Any scoring criteria that you would suggest that we haven't included yet? And then we'll also just open it up for any comments or questions on any of the material or anything about these programs that we haven't covered today with the last minutes that we have.
I also just want to chime in if there's anyone on the phone that wants to raise their hand. That is achieved by #2. And then we can unmute your line.
Final comments and questions. Are we on the right track? Yes or no?
And we're on time for sure for this meeting. We have until 4 o'clock, and like Bree said, this is our last open comments and questions section. So please raise your hand and share your thoughts if you have any. Cool.
Okay, go ahead, Wes.
Thanks all. I think my comment somewhat revolves around which direction you decide to go in, insofar as how many applicants you invite from the concept phase to the full application phase, and if you're looking to fund most or all of those ones who get to the second round, or if it's just, you know, everyone who's eligible. And I would say if you decide to go in the direction where you're funding most, if not all, of the applicants that get out of the first phase, then you may look to not make it overly onerous, but beef up that first concept phase or submission a bit more to make sure that those projects that are invited to the second round have some of those key elements that are really important in order to implement a project or carry it out, but without, you know, in turn requiring everyone to submit a full application. So I guess trying to be sensitive around the amount of time, bandwidth that you're asking of applicants, while at the same time making sure that, you know, if you go in that direction, you're left with a group that is well positioned to carry it out. And I think that would be my only comment for now. Otherwise, I think you've covered a lot of the most important bases with the questions that you've outlined here. Thanks.
Thanks. Yeah, that's a good point. Definitely something we should think about. Go ahead, Leonard.
Yeah, on the what other scoring criteria should be factored in, I'll just mention explicitly here that it might be good to give pollution exposure information as one of the criteria, and perhaps even a exposure for each of the census tracts in the Cal Enviro screen, or at least the disadvantaged census tracts.
Thanks. Lonnie?
Yes, Lonnie Mason again. What is, quick question. What is the projected amount of pages? Yes.
For the application?
Yes. Mhm.
We're figuring that out. I would say, and very open to feedback. As far as the concept phase goes, I'm kind of hoping that we wouldn't ask for more than 5.
Okay.
That's
Because
kind of my
previously in the past, we had to make that clear. You know,
Yeah.
when you have an 80-page grant, what is it? You know,
Do you have, so
that's just
Lonnie,
unnecessary.
Lonnie, let me put this to you. What is your preference number?
No, that's excellent. What she just said, 5. Oh, that's beautiful. Okay,
Great.
5
Okay, then-
pages.
Perfect. That's what we wanted to hear.
for the concept phase. There would be more going into the full phase.
Yeah, so that's what I'm saying. I'm thinking, see, now you just broke it down because I'm thinking that's the whole full phase.
Yeah.
The number of pages, 5. That would be excellent. 5 pages.
Total?
Yes, you don't need that much information for what we're about to do in our community. We're experts. We've been doing this for years, right?
So let me ask
We know our
then.
community and we know what we need in our community, right? And so some of the things can be redundant. We've looked this over. It can be redundant. It just asks in a different way. The question is asked in a different way. It's the same question. And so the thing is that, you know, this is what we're saying about disadvantaged communities, small grassroots organizations, especially African American, they don't have the staff like some of these NGOs do, you know, and agencies that come into our community that can fill this out. They have the funding to have someone fill that out, you know, for them. Small grassroots organization cannot do that. And they qualify more. We do not need NGOs within our community who are not aware, who are not from that community, dictating what goes on because they see the funding is there. That is the problem. That's been the problem for many, many years. They have the funding because they're NGO, they all around the United States, and they get the support, right? It's the small grassroots organizations that need the support within their community. They're the experts. They're on the ground. They know what's needed. They know the needs assessments within their community. They are aware of it. You know, so it's unfortunate that when they see the funding there, they particularly get the funding, right? Because they have the staff and the expertise there to fill it out and everything, right? And then who do they come looking for? They come looking for small grassroots organizations such as First Generation to support or to assist them, when as First Generation can do it without their assistance. We are capable of doing the work within our community. It just sometimes, you know, when you look at all the bureaucrats, you know, filling out all of that information, we've been through that process, and I'm, you know, you're going through it and you're like saying, we're going through it, and we're like, this is the same question. Same question, but reworded in a different way. So to me, what it's saying is it's trying to, how can I say it, exclude when it should be inclusion. You know, so are you trying to exclude various organizations? Are you trying to include the ones who are, you know, experienced and who have the expertise on their community? I can't come into your backyard, right, and say what's going on in your backyard. You've been there for 25 years, right? I can't, right? So I would need your assistance, right? But you know what needs to be done in your backyard better than anyone else, wouldn't you? Because you've been there for 25 years. You've seen it. So likewise, why would we have someone, a large NGO, come into our community and to come and get our assistance when we can actually finance it ourselves and do the work ourselves?
So I think that seems to talk
And
about
this is
who the lead applicant is and how and the partnership structure. Is that?
well, yeah, and that's what I'm talking about, the capacity of the grant and the number of pages. We don't have, I know I took it to another, you know, we don't have the staff or the stability, you know, to go through 80 pages or 70 pages or 60 or 50 or 40 or 30. That just doesn't make any sense. And we've expressed this in many meetings before.
What do you think? So what do you think about our technical assistance that we're going to be providing for in the full application phase? Lonnie?
How many pages?
Okay. I don't think it'll be any pages yet, but that would help, right? The technical.
Yeah, the technical assistance is, technical assistance is fine. That's great. Yes.
You just want it to be purposeful and meaningful for this process as well. Well, that's definitely, I think, what we're looking forward to.
Yes.
I'm really excited about this, what we're working on, as with listening to everybody today and listening to what's been happening in the past and how we're going to approach these programs. So I really appreciate your comments today, and it actually makes me feel hopeful that what we are thinking of internally with our groups, and then that we are incorporating the feedback, and we're trying to look at, like you said, one question in one application might be reworded in ours, but it might be because we're trying to make it more inclusive. So hopefully you'll be able to stay tuned and provide us more feedback as we move forward. One thing I just want to remind everybody, Lonnie, you did miss the beginning. So just want to let you know that we will have a public comment period.
Sorry.
Yeah, I'm just letting you know you missed that part, but there is going to be a public comment period. And so you'll have an even more direct way to give us feedback on all of these things that we're developing.
Okay, thank you.
Sure.
Thanks, Heather and Lonnie. Giving us a lot of food for thought. I'll go back to Wes, allow you to talk.
Sorry, just one more quick comment. I know the previous speaker had inquired about the number of pages, but I think equally important is if you have a ballpark idea of the amount of time it will take versus the amount of pages for the concept phase in particular and the full guidelines. I think that's really helpful information. I know some of the other state grants we work on, the partners and agencies we're working with are either having to hire private consultants to do it because they just require too much staff time. So they're spending, $50,000, $75,000 and upwards in unrestricted funding that they have to put together a competitive application, which more times than not isn't funded anyway. Or if it's, if it's a lighter lift than staff or district staff or who, the group that's working to put together the proposal, it's just makes it much more equitable, makes it more accessible to smaller agencies, to smaller partnerships and organizations to navigate the process. But that would be helpful information if you can share that on the front end as you move forward towards finalizing the process. The estimated amount of time you anticipate that applicants will have to devote in order to navigate the first and second phase.
Have you seen that done before? Have you seen any other state funding programs provide that kind of information? I'm just curious if there's anything to go off of for us.
Yeah, I'm pretty sure. I'll have to look through my notes. I can talk to a couple of colleagues too. I want to say one program was sharing that it should take no more than 20 or 30 hours to put together like the initial step one application. And I think we're seeing this more with some of the private foundations too, doing it, just being cognizant of the amount of capacity CBOs have to put together proposals. So, and in that case, it was even a lower figure, like step one was 5 to 10 hours.
Yeah, and I am aware that what we've heard from applicants from past solicitations is it's not just filling out the application, it's also like kind of connecting with the partners and stuff, coming up with the project. There's a lot that goes on behind the scenes before you even start writing the application. And we're aware of that and trying to figure out how to facilitate that as well, because it's super necessary to putting together an application.
Absolutely. And I would say, the community engagement too, which is so important, but I think, having reasonable expectations on that front, especially with regards to the first phase, because you can do lots of great community engagement. It's going to take a ton of time. You get everyone's hopes up in the community too. You're also asking a lot from private individuals to invest. And then if there's such a minuscule chance of getting funding, we work with this a lot, and we experience this a lot with community we work with, it's hard to keep going back to the community. It's like, well, we tried, and we didn't get funded this one, and we keep asking for a lot, and there's not a lot of return. And a lot of these projects, the timelines are so long. So you're asking people to stay engaged in a process for years upon years to see anything actually happen. So I think trying to anticipate that and being respectful of all the different parties that have to invest time in putting something together We really appreciate it. I think, 5 years ago, these conversations weren't happening very often with funders and with agencies. So grateful that y'all are considering these comments and thinking about this on the front end.
Thanks. We know we have a long way to go, but we're, I think, slowly making some improvements. I'm going to move on to the phone number here that starts with 619. I'm going to allow you to talk when you unmute yourself. If you could please identify yourself as well.
Yeah, thank you. Dan Hilson here from betterfleet.com. We provide a planning and optimization platform for transitioning to zero emission fleets. The main comment I just wanted to bring up is there is a qualitative and a quantitative sort of side to these transitions. And I think from a qualitative side, there's been a lot of discussion about, having to do that in a way that's very light, which I completely agree with. And it is very difficult in these grant processes, and we've been involved in many of them, to balance all the things people have been talking about. I guess on the quantitative side, particularly trying to do a long-term transition plan, there is kind of a good and a bad way to go about that. And, we see with a lot of these programs, a lot of the federal funding around transit, the mandatory ZEB rollout plans that were put in place, they're actually so light that they were a bit counterproductive, because then when it went to roll out the plan, they sort of had to retrospectively think about what to do to meet the plan that they'd done, which was so high level. So just one thing I want to put out there is that, and I'm not trying to promote my own company, it's a general, there's other people like us out there, but building automated tools that are very low cost, that enable people to get good qualitative results without having to expend a lot of time and effort. I think that's really important and powerful, helping people to guide them, what is best practice as well, rather than letting it to people to sort of devise best practice themselves, which is really difficult, or rely on consultants, without a standard of like what is best practice in transition planning. I'm very passionate about, there is a best practice in transition planning and a non-best practice. So yeah, just want to put out there that, perhaps thinking about some automated tools, providing things that people can use, which can provide some scale to doing the quantitative side of long-term transition planning. Thank you.
Thanks. Yeah, that is a really important aspect of these projects, as we're seeing as some of our early car share grants start ending their grant terms. Any other comments, questions on any of these three programs? All right. Then we'll close out today. Thank you, everyone, for your really valuable feedback. We have a lot to think about, which is how we like to leave work group meetings. I wanted to share a couple reminders about, first, if you didn't get a chance to answer any of the polling questions or you wanted to give it some more thought and you still want to give us your feedback on those polling questions that we had today, we have a survey with the same questions that you can respond to. The link, I believe it's in these slides, and Ashley's going to chat it in as well. So that will close on January 25th, so 1 week from today. But please respond if you weren't able to respond to the polls today. The recording for this meeting will be posted in about 2 weeks, and the third and likely final work group meeting for these three programs for this fiscal year will happen towards the end of March or early April. You have our contact information here. Myself, Violet, Heather, we're open to hearing from you outside of these work group meetings. So please email us if you have comments or questions on anything that we've talked about. And to make sure to stay up to date on future work group meetings and our future solicitation, please subscribe to the GovDelivery listserv. That's the link at the bottom of the slide deck that Ashley will also chat in. And subscribe to Clean and Sustainable Mobility Options within that, because that's a link for all of CARB's Gov deliveries. And I think that's it. So thank you so much for your time. We appreciate it, and have a good rest of your day.
Thank you.